The sea gave back what the island had tried to bury. Tomas drove his spade into the frozen sand and struck iron. The blow rang up his arms and into the dark air, sharp as a gull's cry. Seaweed stung the wind with salt and rot. When the hidden metal answered him with a second note, his hands went cold inside his wool gloves. The tide had fallen farther than any man expected. All along Clachan Bay, the seabed lay bare in slick black ribs and pale flats that shone under a weak moon. Folk from the township had come with lanterns to gather driftwood and cut kelp, but they kept clear of Tomas. Even now, after 12 winters, mothers drew children aside when he passed. No one on North Uist had forgotten the night of the squall. A ferry boat, 12 souls, one rope cut loose in screaming rain. Tomas had reached the shore alive. The others had not all returned. Men still sang the verse at shearing time, low and mean, with his name bent into a hook. He knelt and scraped away wet sand. A curve of bronze emerged, green with age, then a lip, then a cross dark with packed grit. Someone behind him gasped. Old Myrie, who walked with a hazel stick, lowered her lantern and whispered a prayer under her breath. "The chapel bell," she said. From the old kirk the sea swallowed. At that moment, without hand or rope, the bell gave a hollow toll. Lantern flames shook. One boy began to cry. Myrie crossed herself, then turned hard eyes on Tomas, as if the sand itself had chosen him. "Take no step back from it," she said. "A bell does not call an empty name." The iron sound rolled over the flats and out across the dark water. Tomas smelled peat smoke from the village behind the dunes and, under it, the clean bitter scent of snow. He knew then the night had opened something that would not close by morning. The bell beneath the tide. They hauled the bell clear before dawn with ropes, 3 men, and one old croft pony whose breath steamed in white bursts. No one asked Tomas to help, though he had first struck the metal. He stood apart and watched the bell swing from the frame of poles, shedding clots of sand and shell. At the edge of frost and tide, the night gave Tomas a witness. It was smaller than church bells from the mainland, but thick in the throat and heavy at the rim. A crack ran near the crown, healed long ago with a strip of darkened lead. Salt had eaten the carving, yet one line remained, a cross, a wave, and the worn letters of a saint's name. Myrie set her palm on the bronze. Her fingers trembled. Her brother had drowned in the ferry boat 12 years before. She never spoke of him in winter, but that morning she pressed her mouth tight until all color left it. "Carry it to the old byre," she said. "Not into any house. Let no child play near it." The men obeyed. On the islands, folk did not argue much with grief when it wore a brave face. That night the bell rang again. Tomas woke on his bench bed with the sound lodged in his bones. It came over the dune grass and through the turf walls of his hut, one low note, then another, spaced like slow footsteps. The fire in his hearth had sunk to red eyes. Wind worried the thatch. He sat up and listened until the third toll came, and with it the old terror, raw as the first night. He pulled on his boots and went out. Moonlight silvered the macaire and gave the sea the look of beaten pewter. Beyond the byre, near the burn where reeds bent under frost, something moved. At first he thought it a seal dragged high by the tide. Then it rose. A woman stood there, wrapped in a gray skin that shone dark at the edges. Wet hair lay along her back. Bare feet pressed the frozen ground, yet she did not flinch from the cold. Her face held no paint, no ornament, only a calm he could not bear. "You hear it," she said. Tomas stopped 3 paces away. "Who are you?" "One who was in the water when your name broke." The burn hissed around stones. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once and fell silent. Tomas felt the old shame rise like floodwater. "If you came for blame," he said, "the island gave me enough. Blame is a thin meal." She looked past him toward the byre. "The bell rings because a debt lies open. Bronze remembers what mouths spoil." He should have turned away. Instead he heard himself ask, "What debt?" She bent and touched the stream with her fingers. "On the night of the squall, you left a boat under your hand." "That is true. Another truth lies under it, like rock under weed. You know part of it. The dead know all of it." He gripped his cap until the wool twisted. He had carried those moments for years, turning them in the dark until they cut him from every side. Yet no one had ever spoken of another truth. "Say it plain," he said. The woman lifted her hand. Water slipped from it in thin threads. "When the bell rings 3 nights, the sea will claim a payment. Before that hour, bring the bell to the chapel sandbar at the low tide after moonset. Come alone if you want truth. Bring others if you want noise." She stepped back. Her shape folded, quick and strange, and the moon caught slick gray skin where shoulders had been. Then a seal slid into the burned mouth and vanished toward the sea. Tomas stood until the cold bit through his coat. Behind him, from the byre, the bell tolled once more. He did not sleep before morning. The song nobody corrected. By midday the whole township knew the bell had rung in the dark. News moved faster than crows on a small island. Men stopped mending nets to talk. Women at the washing stones turned their heads together. Children began daring one another to touch the byre door. A rusted blade opened what 12 winters had kept shut. Tomas went to the shore path with his creel and found 2 boys singing the old verse. Tomas rowed for his own dry skin, and left the rest to drown. Their mother heard and struck the line dead with one look, but the words had done their work. Tomas kept walking. The straps of the creel bit his shoulders. He had carried worse things than fish. Near the headland, he met Callum McRae, son of the laird's ground officer and now the strongest voice among the township elders. Callum had been a young man on the night of the squall. He had lost an aunt there and made that loss a staff he leaned on in every quarrel. "You were seen out after midnight," Callum said. "I walk farther from the byre. The old ones are praying over the bell." Tomas shifted his creel down to the grass. "Prayers do not fear footsteps." Callum's jaw tightened. "Some men bring dirt where they stand." Years ago, words like that would have driven Tomas to fists. Now they only hollowed him. Still, something in the seal woman's voice had lit a coal he could not stamp out. "Tell me one thing," he said. "Who tied the cargo casks in the ferry that night?" Callum went still. The wind thudded in Tomas's ears. He watched gulls wheel over the surf, white against iron clouds. "I remember the boat sat low before we left. I remember saying so." "You remember what suits you," Callum said. "Everyone knows the rest." He turned and walked on without blessing or farewell. After dusk, Tomas climbed to Myri's house. Peat smoke breathed from the roof vent, and light shone through the small window in strips. She opened at once, as if she had expected him, though no one expected him for good reasons. Inside, the room smelled of broth, wet wool, and the faint sour trace of sheepdog. Myri did not offer him a seat at first. She looked him over, taking stock of his face the way old women take stock of weather. "You have seen something," she said. He nodded. When he told her of the woman by the burn, Myri neither laughed nor crossed herself this time. She ladled broth into a wooden bowl and set it on the table between them. "Eat," she said. "No man speaks straight on an empty stomach." He obeyed. The broth was hot with onion and barley. His hands steadied around the bowl. Myri sat opposite him. "My grandmother spoke of seal folk. Not as nursery play, as neighbors who keep their own rules. They come near when a shore has gone wrong." Tomas lowered the spoon. "Then perhaps this shore has gone wrong for 12 years. At last Myri's face softened. She reached under the settle and drew out a strip of sailcloth, folded many times. When she opened it, a rusted knife lay inside. Tomas knew the bone handle before she touched it. "Where did you get that?" "From my brother's chest after he died. He found it on the beach 3 days after the squall." Her eyes held his. "Not your knife. Callum's father's. I knew the mark on the handle, though I said nothing." Tomas felt the room lean. In his ears came again the rain, the screaming wind, the lash of rope on skin. The ferry had bucked at the shore, half loaded with people and goods, all of them desperate to cross before the channel turned savage. One cask had broken loose and slammed his knee. Another had rolled against the gunwale. Someone had shouted to cut a line before the mast tore free. "I thought I cut the stern rope too late," he said. "I thought my delay sent them broadside into the wave." Myri tapped the knife. "My brother wrote one line and hid it under his psalm book. He said he saw Eogan McRae cut the painter after you jumped with the shore line. He said Eogan wanted the boat off the rocks and feared losing the cargo. Then the wave turned. Her." Tomas shut his eyes. "Owen, dead these 6 years. Callum's father. A man praised at his burial for thrift and order. Why keep silent?" he asked. Myri's answer came like a stone dropped in water. "Because my brother also wrote that you had left them before the second crossing. He said panic took you first, duty second. He did not know whether to save your name or bury another. He chose silence, and silence rotted the whole matter." Tomas looked at the knife, then at his scarred hands. He had spent 12 years accepting one half of the truth because it hurt enough to feel honest. Outside, the bell tolled twice. Myri flinched as if struck. 3 nights, she said? The old woman asked. He stared at the window. Yes. Then the island has little time. Where the old chapel sleeps on the third night, moonset left the bay dim and wide. Tomas and Myri took the bell from the byre on a hand sledge wrapped with old blankets so the bronze would not scrape. They had argued over coming together, and Myri had won by standing up with her stick and walking to the door before he could stop her. With the flood at his knees, Tomas walked back into the cry he once fled. If the dead are speaking, she said, they may as well find me upright. The sand stretched ahead in long ridges, cold under their boots. Pools held the last light like broken glass. Far beyond, a dark bar of higher ground marked the buried chapel site, seen only on certain low tides and only by those who knew where to look. At the edge of the flats, Myri paused and touched the blanket over the bell. My mother used to leave oat bread at the shore on storm eves, she said. Not for luck, for the ones who never came home hungry. Some customs are only grief with a shape. Tomas nodded. He understood. Men on the islands could carry sorrow in silence for years, yet a small act, a bowl set by a door, a lamp left in a window, often held more ache than speech. When they reached the sandbar, ribs of old stone showed through weed and shells. A low wall, half-eaten by the sea. A step going nowhere. The chapel had once served a fishing hamlet before storms and drifting dunes drove the people inland. Now the place felt neither empty nor crowded, but waiting. Set it there, came a voice from the black water. The seal woman rose near a pool, moon pale at the face and dark at the shoulders. This time Myri did cross herself, though she did not run. Together they lowered the bell onto the stone step. The bronze rang softly at the touch, not like iron struck, but like a throat clearing before speech. The woman looked at Tomas. Speak the whole of it. Not the half that lets you hide. Wind moved across the flats. Tomas could smell salt, kelp, and the iron tang of wet stone. He had imagined confession many times, always as a door that might lighten him. Now it felt like lifting a net full of rocks. I saw the weather turning and still took more on board than I should have, he said. I feared anger if I refused them passage. That was my first wrong. Then the casks shifted. I jumped ashore with the rope to warp the boat clear, but when the wave hit, I stayed on land. I heard them call and did not leap back. I told myself I could do more from shore. I do not know if that was sense or fear. Perhaps both. Myri bowed her head, but she did not stop him. Eogan McRae cut the painter, Tomas went on, voice roughening. He prized the cargo and the boat more than warning. Yet I let the island lay the whole burden on me because I believed I had earned it. I kept silence because punishment felt easier than witness. The seal woman stepped onto the stone. Sea water shone on her feet. At last, she said, though not kindly. She touched the bell. The bronze gave one deep note that rolled across the sands and into the channel. From the village side came sudden shouting. Myri turned so fast her shawl slipped. Along the shore path, lanterns jerked and ran. A boy's voice carried over the wind. The children. The sands. Tomas did not wait for more. He knew at once what had happened. The low tide had tempted half-grown boys out to gather stranded fish and dare one another onto the far flats. The flood, driven by a north wind, could race back across Clachan like a beast over open ground. He seized the hand sledge rope. Myri, stay on the bar. Do not order me like weather, she snapped, yet she caught the bell blanket and held it firm. Tomas ran. By the time he reached the first pools, water was already rushing through the channels in white tongues. 3 children stood marooned on a rise of sand, no more than a patch above the flood. A 4th boy was trying to drag the smallest one and falling with each pull. On the shore, villagers shouted useless advice into the wind. Callum McRae had a rope around his waist, but he had chosen a bad line and could not reach them without stepping into a gut that would cut his feet from under him. He looked up as Tomas splashed in. Back away, Callum shouted. The tide will take you. Tomas grabbed the rope from his hands. Then follow if you mean to keep your blood alive. He did not wait for consent. He angled across the current, not against it, reading the old channels by the color of water and the set of foam. Twice the flood struck his knees and nearly spun him. Cold knifed through his boots. Behind him he heard Callum curse, then wade after, paying out rope. The smallest child was crying so hard he could not stand. Tomas lifted him under one arm and thrust the other 2 boys toward the rope. Hold and move when I move, he said. No hero work. The 4th child, a girl with sand on her cheeks, looked straight at him. Will we drown? Not if your feet listen better than grown men's pride, he said. She nodded once. That steadied them all. They began the return. Water climbed from shin to thigh in places. One boy slipped and vanished to the chest, but Callum heaved the rope and Tomas caught the lad by the collar. Shore voices grew louder, then shriller as another surge broke around them. Far back on the bar, the chapel bell rang. Myri stood beside it, striking bronze with a stone in slow, measured beats. Each note cut the confusion clean. Tomas took the rhythm into his body and moved on it. Step, brace, pull, breathe. The children copied without thinking. Even Callum fell into time with the bell. They reached firm ground in a rush of hands, sobs, and wool shawls. Mothers took the children and sank to their knees in wet sand. No one cheered. Relief on the islands rarely arrived with noise. The toll heard in daylight. Dawn came slow and colorless. The children lived. One had a fever by morning, but the island healer wrapped him in warm blankets and said he would mend. Folk gathered outside Myri's house before the frost had left the grass. In daylight, the island gave the bell not fear, but witness. Tomas stood among them with salt still dried on his coat. He had not washed. Let them see the tide on him. Callum arrived last. His face looked older than the day before. He carried the rusted knife in both hands, wrapped once more in sailcloth. Murmurs moved through the crowd. No one knew yet why he held it, but the island knew the weight of an object brought out in public after years of hiding. Myri stepped forward and spoke first. Her voice cut sharp despite her age. She named her brother, the note under the psalm book, the knife from the beach, and the truth he had failed to bring into daylight. Then she gave the knife to Callum. He stared at it a long moment. Wind pulled at his coat skirts. At last he said, "The mark is my father's. I know it." His throat worked. "I found his old tally book after the bell came up. It lists the casks loaded that night. Too many." He forced the crossing. The crowd shifted, restless as sheep before sleet. A few looked toward Tomas, as if the old habit of blame might still serve. Tomas did not look away. "Hear the rest," he said. "I warned of weather and still launched. I stepped ashore and stayed ashore when fear had me by the ribs. Another man's greed helped break the boat, but my fear helped break trust. I took silence for punishment and called that honesty. It was only another kind of hiding." No one spoke for several breaths. Then a voice from the back, young and fierce, said, "My father died there. What am I to do with this now?" Tomas turned and found Rory, who had been a child in arms on the night of the squall and now stood broad-shouldered as any crofter. His eyes shone with old hurt borrowed from the house that raised him. Tomas answered without haste, "You do what you must. Curse me if you need. Turn your face away if that is easier. But know the dead were failed by more than one man, and by more than one silence." Rory's fists tightened. Then he looked at Callum, at Myri, at the mothers holding children saved in the night. The anger did not leave him, but it changed shape. That was enough for the moment. Near noon they carried the bell to the shore again. This time the whole township went, even those too old to walk without arms to steady them. The tide was far out. Light touched the flats in dull silver. Myri led a psalm in Gaelic, not loud, but steady. Others joined, some true, some broken by grief. No one pushed for a grand act. Island people knew the sea disliked display. At the chapel step they set the bell where Tomas had placed it in the dark. The seal woman lay beyond in shallow water, half hidden among rocks, her seal eyes fixed on the gathering. Whether all saw her or only a few, no one said. Callum knelt first. He pressed his palm to the bronze and bowed his head for his father and for the lives twisted by his father's choice. After him came Tomas. He laid both hands on the bell. The metal felt cold at first, then strangely warm under the skin. He did not ask to be cleared. He asked only that the dead be named rightly and the living kept from more falsehood. When he stepped back, Myri gave the bell one clean strike. The note rolled over sand, over dune, over croft and byre. Gulls rose in a white burst from the shoreweed. Out in the channel, the seal woman slipped beneath the water without splash. The bell did not ring again that night, nor any night after. Spring found Tomas still living in his turf hut, still poor, still marked by what he had done. Redemption on a small island did not arrive like a gate thrown wide. It came like weather clearing in strips. A widow let him mend her ferry skiff. A boy who had mocked him asked how to read across current by foam. Callum, one raw evening, stopped on the path and held out a coil of new rope with both hands. They did not embrace. They did not smile much. Yet they worked the next tide together. On some low moons, Tomas walked to Clachan and stood where the chapel stones breathed through the sand. He listened to the ordinary sounds at last. Lap of water, cry of tern, wind in marram grass. No bronze called his name. That silence cost him dear, and for that reason he trusted it.